Hello again, everybody. And I know, welcome to Freeform Friday on a Sunday. What in the hell are we doing here? Well, we were going to go live yesterday, I should say, but things didn't work out so well. But I will not get into that. So, on that note, we're waiting for Allen to join us on the live stream, and we are going to get a discussion going. How's everybody doing? How's your Sunday? I know. We unfortunately have to think about the beginning of a new work week, don't we? And don't worry, this is water, not vodka. And before Alan joins us, well, Alan is here with us. What's going on, sir? How are you? Can you hear me? Is everything all right?
I can hear you, David, and I tell you, the summer rolls on and everybody's feeling a buzz. And if you want to pop the territory like Eddie Gilbert in 1988, do in the Continental Wrestling Federation as Eddie Gilbert does.
All right. So shall we get right into it? I know there have been many subjects that you've sent me over the last few weeks since the last few times we went live. Do you think we can get through them in one episode, or shall we leave them for another day? All up to you. All up to you, my fearless leader.
Well, I am your partner, not your leader so much, but thank you. I will lead in this case a little bit. I'd like to basically at least go with the topics I mentioned the other day. I don't remember what was before that so much, but however you want to do it, I would like to cover for sure the topics that I mentioned to you the other day. That's all right.
Well, we can start. We can no time like the present to start right now.
All right, it's not like a PLE that goes on forever. We're just getting right into it. No 5-minute ring entrances.
Well, though we don't have it. We don't have no 5-minute ring entrances. We get straight to the point, and we don't beat around the bush, so to speak.
No, we don't have no scrubs. So take it away, Dave.
All right. So, as per some of the topics you wanted to discuss, I have them right here on my phone. So we're going to kick things off with the fascinating main event that went down on August the 5th of 1981, over 44 years ago, when the NWA and Georgia Championship Wrestling ran a show in Maury Giannetti's hometown of Columbus, Georgia at the Municipal Auditorium with the following results, but I won't go through said results. I'll leave it to you to lead the discussion or educate us.
Well, I'd be more than happy to. And the reason I found this card so interesting, you see, at this time, the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, father of the current babyface face of the WWE Universe, Cody Rhodes, was the NWA World Champion at this time, and his battles with Terry Funk, with Harley Race, with Ric Flair are extremely well publicized, and they were often quite amazing, given the people involved. But this particular show intrigued me because he was going against a guy who was probably more well known for his run in the New York area in the WWF, known as the one and only high flyer from the Fiji Islands, Jimmy Superfly Snuka. I mean, what an interesting dream match. And I'm not talking about the Dusty. If Dusty had battled Jimmy in late 1989, it wouldn't have been a dream match. It would have been unusual, but they had both slowed down considerably by then. Dusty and Jimmy could really go in 1981 at this point in the show that we're talking about. And I always considered them both such perennial baby faces that it's a very intriguing match to me, because even though Dusty was a heel early in his career, obviously with the Texas Outlaws, and Captain Redneck Dick Murdoch, the alleged card-carrying member of the KKK, we don't know for sure. But Jimmy Snuka, I mean, he did.
Oh yeah, I know. I remember all that stuff. I
Yeah,
remember
exactly.
I remember all that stuff. I remember Bad News Allen saying if he'd be a member of the clan.
Who would be remembered? Dick?
He being
Dick Murdoch.
senior Murdoch.
Oh, I could believe it. I mean, I know that
Yes.
even though many people complimented him, I know that Baby Doll, you remember Baby Doll, Nicola, the one who was married to Sam Houston? She was a very famous manager in the NWA and similar areas.
Yes,
She
of course. We all remember Baby Doll.
and the infamous envelope that was never
We
revealed.
all remember Baby Doll, don't we
Yeah,
all?
yeah. Well, Baby Doll, I mean, well, that was Jake the Snake Roberts' sister-in-law, right, for a while too, and the daughter-in-law of the infamous Grizzly Smith, through marriage, of course, and everything. But yeah, so Baby Doll's the only one I've really ever heard openly say that she despised Dick Murdoch, not because of anything he did to her, but for who he was as a person. She didn't want to talk about him because most people compliment Dick Murdoch, saying that he was very mentally unbalanced, but he was such a cool guy. And, Dick Murdoch actually robbed himself of what could have been a run on top because Dick Murdoch couldn't decide if he wanted to be a very serious, competent wrestler, which he was. He was amazingly gifted, or if he wanted to be a comedy wrestler because he would revert in the middle of the same match. He'd start out serious, and he's great talent, was a great talent, but he would switch to comedy in the middle of the match. So, you can't picture someone like a Ric Flair or a Harley Race doing that. So, no promoter would have put him as the top guy because even though he had the talent, he had trouble defining his identity. But who he was in real life is another question. And Baby Doll was one of the most outspoken proponents of him not being such a great person. But I digress. Dusty Rhodes versus Snuka in '81, that was really something. And Snuka did have an earlier run as a heel in the late '70s, early '80s. But of course, by the time he got to New York, Snuka was nothing but a fan favorite. So I find this Dusty versus Snuka match very intriguing. It was so rare. And this is when they were both, if Dusty wasn't in his prime, he wasn't that far past it. And Snuka in the late '70s was quite a beast, man, in the ring. Like he was all muscle, all speed, all agility, and just so talented. It was a very intriguing match. The rest of the card was interesting for other reasons. I mean, you had my favorite, Ken Patera, who was on the show as well, which I was very glad for, getting the better of Steve O. Do you remember Steve O?
Not the same Steve O we're probably going to be talking about. I know Steve O from Jackass, but certainly this is not the same Steve O we're going to be talking about.
Right, no. No, not at all. This is actually, and again, no relation to Barry O, the late uncle of Randy Orton, but no, Steve O was actually a wrestler named Steve Oslanowski. It was so hard to pronounce his surname; it was easier to go by O. And he was somewhat big in the Georgia Championship Wrestling area where the show took place. Yeah, he also had a run in the AWA later. He didn't get much past the lower mid card, but he was no match for Ken Patera. Also very interesting on this card, a match between two bruisers, Terry Bam Bam Gordy and Butch Reed, working under his real name of Bruce Reed back then. Hacksaw Butch Reed, future member of Doom and the future Natural in the WWF. Of course, anybody who appeared on WrestleMania 3 is a major star, so Butch Reed.
No, I Hacksaw Butch Reed before Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
Yeah, and they were hacksaw simultaneously too. They both didn't mind using the name because it was often a name given to rough, gritty, tough guys. They both came from the gridiron. They were both football players. So, yeah, I guess it was just a nickname that went around, and obviously not in the WWF under that same nickname. But this is early Butch Reed, and actually Duggan was on the card too. Speaking of his namesake, and he actually lost to one of your musical favorites. That's Michael P.S. Hayes of the Fabulous Freebirds.
Dude.
That's right.
That's all I have
So
to say about that.
Yeah,
I'm not
exactly.
about to start singing. I'm not about to start singing.
No, well, I know how you are on Bad Street USA. It's you don't want to mess with you because I know you're at the last house on the right? So you don't want to mess with you.
Ah, well, I am the last house on the left or right, depending on what your geographical position is.
Well, I think it's probably a cul-de-sac, so I'm not sure if you could come from the other side. But yeah, no, it's a very fair point. If you're overhead in a helicopter, no, that's true. It could be that. Or yeah, you're right. It could be that way if you're turning around. So anyway, good to see the early fabulous Freebirds there. I'm not going to get into the prelim matches, but a lot of future huge names of the '80s in this NWA Georgia Championship Wrestling card. But the reason I mentioned it is yes, it's the 44th anniversary, but also because Dusty versus Snuka is such an intriguing main event. I don't remember them really battling each other anywhere for a prolonged period or even occasionally. So I just happened to be intrigued. Obviously, both of them went on to even greater fame, but and infamy in some cases. but this is Jimmy Snuka, before New York, before Nancy Argentino, before his leap off the cage onto Don Morocco and all that stuff. And so
Yeah.
yeah,
So, in other words,
yeah. I don't know if Dusty took the splash or not, but it's well, he probably didn't, or if he did, he must have done a kick out because Dusty won the match and. He still left Columbus, Georgia, champion that day, and yes, the birthplace of Marty Jannetty, who probably would have been 20-ish, no, maybe even younger at this point. Early, yeah, Marty Jannetty was just getting his career warmed up at this point too. So maybe he was there, maybe he was in the audience. I don't know. So yeah, just wanted to mention that because of Dusty versus Snooker.
of course, we all got to talk about the American team. That's the rules, baby. He go against Jimmy Superfly Snuka, but then he eventually made his way to Booker Genius Thin. But we talked about Genius Thin, Daddy. We talked about that. We talk about that all the time. We don't need to talk about it no more.
No,
Um, were
he
there
may have had a muffler then.
any other I mean topics you wanted to discuss in regards
Yeah.
to said event?
Not that particular show, but I do have other things, of course, to discuss.
Okay, so then we're going to move on to an event where Bryant St. John and David Sierra fought George Wells and Ted Oates to a time limit draw.
No, that is the same
Um,
show. That is the same show.
that is the same event.
Yeah, I just didn't talk about the opening matches. Although, since you mentioned Brian St. John, I will mention that he was a well-known tag team partner of Sweet Stan Lane before Stan Lane was in the Fabulous Ones or the Midnight Express. Brian St. John was his regular partner. Do you remember who trained Stan Lane?
Tell us. Tell us.
Well, he liked those letters W and O. It's the Nature Boy Ric Flair, who helped train Stan Lane actually in 1979 before his debut.
Okay, and now that we're on the subject of Ric Flair, what are your thoughts on, if you follow current events, of what's currently going on in Ric Flair's life? Um, what are your thoughts about that? Because this is something I discussed with a friend of mine today. I won't name names, so don't get me started. But apparently, Ric Flair's been going to bars and restaurants, and he's been not formatively, but literally been partying too much, and he's been soiling himself. What are your thoughts on that, if any?
Uh, well, I don't know if this was occurring after Hulk Hogan's death or before him.
Uh, it's I don't know if it's a before or we really don't have to discuss a before and an after picture, But the fact remains is the man, the guy is embarrassing himself. He's
Nothing
going
new.
out and about, and he's still partying like he used to do in his heyday.
Oh, absolutely. No.
That's my issue.
Yeah. Well, no. I mean, the Soiling story I'd heard a few weeks ago too. But well, I mean, look, the guy has been troubled for so many years in many ways. He may not be dealing well with being out of the spotlight, except for the wrong reasons, and he, that's why he still talks about having yet another one more match. I mean, you really want to see him at 76 years old with the pacemaker again do what he did a few years ago? Like, I don't know. Just he either has run out of well, I mean, look, his life has been in a way on the skids because, he lost Fifi, Wendy Barlow. I think she didn't want to be with him anymore because he refused to give up that lifestyle after they had rekindled their romance. And he never really properly, of course, got over the death of his son. I don't know how you can get over something like that, but and he can't be in the main event or at least in an angle every week on TV. And I don't know what's to say. I mean, all he's doing is continually diminishing his legacy. He's not the only one. I've seen others do it. It's just that Ric Flair is so spectacularly flamboyant that when he does it, it's extremely memorable. And it's very easy to capture footage these days, and of course anecdotes and stories. So well, look, I mean, I
Right.
don't think I mean, I don't know, he may be worse than he was a few years ago, but I don't expect him to necessarily do that much better because he's got to be Ric Flair 24 hours a day. And this is a sad version of Ric Flair. I still prefer to remember the one from the 1980s and early 90s. I don't like to think about too much about the period after that, especially not the last 10, 15 years. So it's sad.
No,
It's embarrassing.
it's totally understood. It's
Yeah.
totally understood, but I just thought I would bring that up because it was
Yeah.
brought to my attention today, and I didn't need to know that Ric Flair literally, after making a fool of himself, soils himself.
Well, when you're 76 and you think you're 36, things like that can happen. So what can you do? I feel sad for him. I'm sad for his children, the three remaining ones who have to know this and live with it. And maybe it's just unfortunate that he didn't really deal majorly with the issues that he struggles with psychologically, probably. And I wish him well and a long life, but what can you do? His life, and I guess as long as he's considered of sound mind, he can live it any way he wants, I suppose.
Well, that's the thing. Any way you want to live should
Well,
not be the way you want to live.
no, it shouldn't be. But when has Ric Flair done anything conventional? This is Ric Flair we're talking about. He hasn't lived the most conventional life. Some have said he's even struggled with his childhood issues of being adopted. He had trouble with dealing with that, and he was always pretty wild. It's just, when you get old and you want to be like you were, and you want to be wild, and he's still wild, but in a very embarrassing way now.
Well, that's the thing. You want to be wild, but at a certain age, there comes a time where enough's enough.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, not too many legends of this business have done that to that extent in their 70s, but of course, Ric Flair is the trailblazer. So Buddy Rogers didn't even live that long, so he wasn't like that. But the man he patterned himself after, who we discussed on a recent broadcast, Buddy Rogers wasn't doing things like that, but he didn't even make it to the age that
Right.
Flair is now. So, bless him. I really hope he finds peace and resolution to his turmoil.
Well, we do hope he finds peace. Sorry, you cut out for a
No problem.
moment.
No, I'm here.
And now frozen again.
Hold on, I'm gonna do something.
But worse with you, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, and we're back. Oh boy, it looks like my crappy Wi-Fi took a dump and returned
Just
it
like
into
that.
glory.
That's a funny expression, all things considered.
Yeah, just like that. Okay. So there's another thing you wanted to talk about. Um, okay. So I'll read what you sent me, and then I'll let you ad lib from here on out because I don't want to read this word for word verbatim. But if you need help and you need assistance, I'm here for you.
Thank you.
So this is another topic that we said we were going to talk about: the entertaining product being broadcasted by Continental Wrestling Federation, the CWF, on their TV show 37 years ago in August of 1988, such as Dr. Tom Pritchard versus Mike Starr featuring the Bambi, Dirty White Girl confrontation, as well as an announcement that Jack Curtis has been fired from the CWF after taking bribes from Paul E. Dangerously. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Paul Heyman, and Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert. Eddie then attacks a pro wrestling This Week photographer known as Sam Lowe. Eventually, Austin Idol makes the save and a wild brawl ensues. Will he be hurt? I know your most of your stuff is grammatically correct.
Oh, that was a
William B. Hurt versus Turbo Tech Manson.
Yeah, you don't have to keep reading if you don't want to. So that's the preamble was what you read before. Do you want to keep reading?
I know it's the notes.
Yeah.
It's the notes you left me. I mean, I'm reading it until it's that you remember, oh, where we're getting at in the show, where you're getting at, and then I'll let you discuss.
Okay. Go ahead.
Oh boy. So much more. So much more.
Well, you don't have to
So,
read that part if you want. I can talk about it without you reading it if you want.
well, Eddie Gilbert assaulting a 14-year-old boy who turns out to be Willie B. Hurt's son. Well, we know that's a work right then and there. And other than that, I won't read no more and let you take it from there.
Well, thank you, David. And I'll actually start by talking about Willie B. Hurt because it's a funny name, and you weren't sure if it was spelled correctly or I wrote it correctly. Willie B. Hurt was actually a sort of supposed to be a funny name, like alcoholic, like that type of thing. Or like I don't know, I leaned over
Right.
like one of these names. Well, Willie B. Hurt was actually just a pseudonym for a guy you know pretty well, I think, at least from WWF enhancement talent squash matches, if not from anywhere else. The one and only Pistol Pez Watley. You remember Pistol Pez Watley? No.
Absolutely not. Chat us up.
Okay, well, Pez Watley was a supremely talented gentleman who originally cut his teeth in the Southern Territories and was eventually brought into the NWA and was even pushed a bit as a tag team with Tiger Conway Jr. called the Jive Tones in early 1988, late 1987. And the Jive Tones were memorable because they wore some of the most flashy outfits. Like picture the Fabulous ones, but in dazzling leprechaun green, like green, shining emerald suits. And they kind of had like, it was almost like they were a song and dance act, like a Motown act or something. But Watley himself was a very talented worker who, up until the late 80s, did his thing in tag teams and singles, and eventually was picked up by the WWF and spent a few years in the early 90s as an enhancement talent. Sometimes he was one of those like really good enhancement talents that you actually thought might even have a slight chance at times, like the Steve Lombardis before he was the Brooklyn Brawler and Iron Mike Sharp types. But here Watley was actually doing an interesting gimmick with called Willie Be Hurt. But let's get back to Eddie Gilbert for a minute. So basically, we're in the throes of the transition from Continental Championship Wrestling into the Continental Wrestling Federation. And when the change happened is when David Wood, who was a television station guy, wanted to save the Fuller family, you know, Robert Fuller, Colonel Rob Parker, his brother Ron Fuller, etc., from the Welch family. That's a wrestling dynasty that, when you talk about the Harts, the Von Erichs, the Armstrongs, the Rhodes, the Funks, like the Welch family often gets left out in that discussion, but they were a very prominent family in wrestling too, and they had the southeastern United States, Alabama, Pensacola, Florida area kind of sewn up. But what happened is in '85, Robert Fuller bought Ron Fuller bought the territory from the previous owners and named it Continental Championship Wrestling. But after a few years, it was just too hard to compete with the WWF. So they sold it to the TV. Yeah,
Right.
so they sold it. Yeah, so they sold it to the TV station guy David Wood, who rechristened it Continental Wrestling Federation, and he wanted to call it that because they had the idea that they might compete with Vince McMahon, if you could believe it, and Jim Crockett. It sounds ridiculous. How could this promotion? I mean, even Vern Gagne and the AWA were falling apart gradually. So what the reason behind the name change is they thought by having the words WF Wrestling
Well,
Federation.
anybody who was everybody thought they could compete with Vince McMahon.
Yes, that's right. Herb Abrams and many
Oh boy!
others.
Now you're sorry. I can still hear you, but you were pixelated for like a millisecond. Ay, ay, ay.
Oh,
But let's not. Let's move on. Let's move on and continue what you were saying.
okay, so instead of Pistol Pete, I was Pixel Pete there. Or Pistol Pez, I was Pixel Pez for a while. Yeah, so basically the idea was they were going to take over a big area of the country and compete with the WWF. The name Continental Championship, it sounded very regional, so they renamed themselves the Continental Wrestling Federation. So people might hopefully confuse WWF and CWF. So it's supposed to be funny, but, you know, to serious people who understood, but they did something really good. They brought in Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert, who, as I was doing the rhyme at the beginning, really popped the territory. He was producing some of the best television, wrestling television, in that period. Often the shows were far more interesting than some of the NWA shows, which were starting to falter. The WWF shows were very slow-paced and cartoonish, but the CWF did some very interesting stuff. And look at some of the talent you mentioned. Paul Heyman, obviously an ally of Gilbert then, was brought in. Later, of course, Heyman would replace Gilbert as the ECW booker 5 years later in another life, and their friendship would go down the tubes. That's another story. But at this time, I believe they were allies, and Dr. Tom Pritchard was there. The Willie B. Hurt stuff was really entertaining. The Apter magazines, the Stanley Weston family of wrestling magazines were really covering that hard. I can remember in the summer of 1988, I did not get Continental Wrestling Federation living here. I was able to see on the recap shows like Pro Wrestling Plus a bit of Continental Wrestling action, and I was very intrigued, but the magazines were really hyping it up that there was something interesting going down way down yonder in Alabama and northern Florida and Georgia, or parts of Tennessee, eastern Tennessee, where they reached. Ron Fuller, of course, is a legend in East Tennessee. Even Jim Cornette. No, that was Ron Wright. Excuse me, mixing him up. Anyway, so great stuff was going on. They did good angles here. They brought in this kid who they said was Willie B. Hurt's son, and they attacked him. And the photographer, it wasn't a real photographer, the guy. It was a lot of great stuff. And you had the women. You know, it's always exciting to watch women who aren't wrestlers have cat fights in this era. Now, Bambi is a wrestler, the dirty white girl, who happened to go on to later despise Tammy Sitch when she was doing her Tammy Fitch gimmick in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. was the real life partner of the Dirty White Boy, the future
Oh
TL
yeah,
Hopper.
I mean, I remember she was doing her whole I'm a Hillary Clinton supporter.
Yeah, so Dirty White Girl was a natural, how would you say, nemesis for her because Dirty White Girl was a simple Southern girl who believed in traditional values, and here comes the obnoxious Tammy Fitch from New Jersey who was talking about empowerment and feminism, and that crowd was not into that. And Dirty White Girl was of the people, and she was not for that. And she naturally, no, a lot of people didn't like Tammy Fitch, as we know, as the years went on. But Dirty White Girl certainly did
Well,
not.
a lot of people don't like her even more now so today. Sorry to cut you off. That was rude.
No, not at all. No, I'm glad you. I'm glad you made that point. That is very true because now everybody knows what she's all about. But back then, I mean, she was maybe nicer to a point, but no, they were natural rivals. So anyway, but that's later on. In '88, Tammy Sitch was not really in the wrestling business. Dirty White Girl was, and Dirty White Boy Tony Anthony, of course, went on to be TL Hopper, an infamous WWF character that you've talked about several times. What do you want to tell us about TL?
Oh, numerous. He has his moves numbered, number 1 and 2. I've said that many times before, but I'll keep saying it.
Never gets old, wrestling plumber. That's right. But he wasn't so pathetic at this point. I mean, not his fault. But no, he was the wild, dirty white boy, Tony Anthony, at this juncture. And his feud with Tom Pritchard, they did this great angle I talked about months ago on the show where Dirty White Girl came out with a black eye and claimed she was a victim of domestic abuse and she was looking for sympathy from Pritchard, and Pritchard, like, this is Eddie Gilbert booking. It was really good. Like, I don't know if I'm doing it justice, but the stories were very engrossing and entertaining. And this period in the summer of '88, like, business really started to go up. So maybe even the Fullers were shocked because the Continental, was not doing great business. And then they started, and they were really like captivating. You had Randy Colley, the first Demolition Smash before Barry Darsow took the role. When he was, he used to be one of the Moondogs, right? He was Moondog Rex, I believe. And Randy Colley,
You would know more than you would know more than I did because
yeah,
I know Moondog Rex, Moondog Spot, and
yeah. I think
my
Spot was left.
education as far as the Moondogs go is few and far between. You would know
Yeah.
more about them than I ever would.
Well, thank you, David. And there were many Moondogs. There was, of course, like you said, Spot and Rex were the two mainstays, and in later years, and yeah, and Larry Latham, I believe, was one. Randy Colley was another. Of course, Lonnie Main was a Moondog. Sailor Ed White, etc. Anyway. So Randy Colley, though, who did put on the makeup in the first few nights of Demolition, but the crowd recognized him, as Bill Eadie has told the story many times. Here he reinvented himself as a character, most interestingly called Detroit Demolition. Isn't that interesting? Reinvented himself as Detroit Demolition. Pretty cool, eh? So he
Learning
carried,
something new every day.
yeah. So he carried the
Yeah,
Demolition gimmick,
very
yeah.
much so.
Yeah, exactly. Missy Hyatt was here at this period too because she was married to Eddie Gilbert, and she even debuted Missy's Manor, which wasn't that the name of the short-lived thing she did in the WWF, the talk show that didn't go anywhere. They never showed it.
Yes, yes,
Missy's
which didn't go anywhere, but it is known in the annals, not annals, of storytelling.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they never aired it, but here before the no, this is actually after that. She did that in '87 in the WWF, but here in '88 she was taking that act on the road, and she did it in whatever promotion she was with in Memphis and CWF here. Of course, she would bring it to the NWA later, and her future colleague Paul Heyman, Paulie Dangerously, during this month would come on to her show, and so a lot of really great talkers and good workers. And I was talking about Randy Colley. Rick Hazard is a very interesting guy. You're familiar with the name Rick Hazard? Probably not, I guess.
Absolutely not. Chat us up. Chat us up. And
All
most
right.
people probably don't. Maybe
No.
some of you that will tune in later will maybe know who you're talking about, but I'm assuming. But then that makes an ass of you and me. But let's assume nobody knows who you just discussed. So tell us about that.
Okay. Rick Hazard is a fascinating guy because most fans of the Von Erich dynasty know him as a world class championship wrestling referee in Dallas and Fort Worth and the other cities that world class went to. And they thought of him as a competent referee, but he was actually also a wrestler. He had two careers at the same time. And sometimes when he would wrestle, he formed the championship tag team with Len Denton, who was known as the Grappler, very, very reputable wrestler who made his biggest name in Oregon in the Pacific Northwest, but also wrestled all over the US. So they would be known together as the Grapplers, and sometimes Rick Hazard would referee as himself, and then, unbeknownst to fans in the audience, put on the hood and go back out as Grappler number two, and the Grapplers would wrestle a tag team match. In Continental, though, Rick Hazard was not really a referee,
Okay.
so he could, yeah, so he could wrestle as himself, which he did at this point. And he used to wrestle under his real name of Rick Branch. He used to be known as Ricky Branch in the early years of his career. And he was subject to one of the biggest early internet rumors of a death that was misreported. A lot of people thought he had passed away, and even Gary Hart, the great manager Gary Hart, in his rare book, which I highly recommend, there's an audio version of it on YouTube if anybody ever wants to listen to it. It's such a hard book to get in print. Good luck if you can. Even Gary Hart reports that Rick Hazard is one of the deceased wrestlers
I,
or people.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but you say it's on YouTube. You said
Yeah,
Gary Hart's books on YouTube.
yeah, it's called, I think, My Life in Wrestling or something like that.
I'm
Yeah.
I didn't quite get that. So it's just my automatic knee jerk reaction was to provide the people with um, a link if that's available on YouTube.
Last I saw it was, I haven't looked in a while, quite a while, but there's supposed, yeah, I mean, there's an audio form of the book that's supposedly still, I would assume, that's up. Highly recommended. It's easily, I mean, one of the best wrestling books. Like easy. It's not WWE managed. Like he didn't have to watch his P's and Q's. I mean, Gary
I
Hart
think I
wasn't
might have
even.
it. Is it called Gary Hart My Life in Wrestling? And it
Yeah,
begins it begins with chapter one Chicago, chapter two Michigan, and so on and so forth.
yeah, all the way. I think there's probably 28 chapters.
Okay.
Yeah.
So all right. So what I'm gonna do, let's see how this works. I am no, I'm okay, that didn't work. I'm going to, okay, yeah, StreamYard, I think it worked. I'm going to do it one more time. But if it doesn't work out so good, well, I think I'm sending the same damn link. But
Well, you could tell people what to
the whole
search for.
thing, I think I'm sending the same. Well, it's good that you know where to search, and you know where to search our broadcast. And this gives me the fine opportunity to say this: if you enjoy, if you enjoy what we're doing, please be sure to like and subscribe. Takes a few seconds. Takes a few moments. So, okay, I've shared the Freeform Friday link twice. You know, one,
Yeah.
two, three times a charm. But what I've done is I've sent you also the YouTube link of the Gary Hart audio link. So the YouTube link you see is exactly what it was we were just talking about. So check it out. Let me know what you think. But at the end of the day, here's one thing I ask each and every one of you to do. I don't mean to ask so much, but if you like what you see, it takes a few seconds to like and subscribe and drop a comment. And yes, personal, professional feedback does mean a lot. But if you're going to insult and troll us, we really, really, or I personally do not need, nor do I desire to have your time and your vulgar ass comments. Okay? They will be deleted and you will be removed from participating in future broadcasts. Do you understand me? I hope you do. Now back to the show. Where were we getting at?
So I was talking about how Gary Hart in his book actually falsely reported that Rick Branch, aka Rick Hazard, had falsely passed away. He's not the only one. A lot of people thought he passed away and said it. And it turns out they're wrong because the guy was very much alive and had left the wrestling business and was working at a Toyota dealership, if you could believe it, in a pretty good position. And he later left that place to work in the financial department of another company. And I don't know if he's still alive now. I hope he is. But no, he's very much alive, but he was subject to one of the first false rumors that I can remember on the internet where everybody mostly believed that he had passed away because they hadn't seen him on any wrestling events or whatever the reason. And he was a pretty good talent. I mean, he was sometimes portrayed as an enhancement talent, and he deserved better. But in this show, in this particular month in Continental Wrestling, he was working with Lee Peak. Now, Lee Peak is a guy who was also an enhancement talent, a pure enhancement talent, who went on to wrestle guys like Dusty Rhodes and all that on WWF television, especially when they would swing through the Huntsville, Alabama area. And because, wherever the WWF was holding its TV tapings, they would often use preliminary talent from local promotions. Why would they, except for the Lombardis and the Mike Sharps and all that, they wouldn't want to fly a bunch of unknown names across the country. So they would use, whichever local wrestlers were adequately trained in that area. And Lee Peak was from that area, I guess. And so he was in Continental, but later would go on to WWF Enhancement. So I talked about Detroit Demolition. They also had a military guy doing a Sergeant Slaughter Corporal Kirshner gimmick called D.I. Carter, which was actually a guy named Bob Carter who did a pretty good military gimmick for just somebody who put it on in the regional circuits of this time. And perhaps even most importantly to mention, I wouldn't want to leave out Lord Humongous, Sid Udy doing the Lord Humongous gimmick, which he brought to Continental in this period.
Of course, we don't want to. Let's not forget Sid Udy.
No, for sure not. May he rest in peace.
Let's not forget about that.
Absolutely, and this was probably about 7-8 months before the NWA hired him, and he formed the Skyscrapers with the future Waylon Mercy, Dangerous Danny Spivey. You know what I mean? And Sid was really making an impression.
I know what you're
He was really making an impression, Sid, under the. How would you describe it? Like a Jason mask or a hockey? Like what kind of a mask would you say? A really scary mask. A hockey goalie mask? I don't know how you describe it. No, it was more like a leather, like a demolition.
It was. To me, it was more to do with. Mel Gibson, the Road Warrior. To me, that was what it was more to do with.
Right.
I didn't think of it as, looking back at remembering or reminiscing of slasher movies, I don't remember it being anything
No,
that was related to Jason, so to speak.
right.
It really wasn't anything like it. It was just something completely different. When I look back and reflect on Lord Humongous or the mask that was worn, it was more to do with, I would say, the Mel Gibson Road Warrior or the Road Warrior franchise.
Right. Well, you're an expert
That's
on
what I
slot.
was.
No,
That's
I'm
what
sure
I
you're.
was thinking of it as.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure you're right. I mean, you're a horror movie connoisseur anyway, too. So definitely take your word for that. But I mean,
Well, I don't fancy myself as a connoisseur, and I wouldn't say that the Road Warrior movie was exactly a horror movie, but
no, I'm not talking
for those
about.
of you, maybe it's horrible. It's a horror that you have to watch this.
No, no, no. No, I know. I wasn't suggesting that Mad Max was a horror movie. I was talking about Friday the 13th and Halloween and all that. But
Well,
anyways, yeah.
yeah,
So
but
no,
I
I mean, no.
mean, I mean, everybody, everybody pretty much borrows um, from another franchise at some time. I mean, it's a tale as old as time. It's a stylistic strategy that even most people in Hollywood do nowadays. Is there actually, and that begs the question. I know we're getting off topic, but we'll pivot back to what originally we were discussing about. But I have to ask this tale as old as time question. Is there actually such a thing, or is there a possibility or an opportunity for a complete and utter original idea in this day and age?
I hope that was rhetorical, or you're asking our viewers and not me.
Well,
Are you asking me?
we'll have viewers that are not watching now, but will watch later, and
Yeah.
maybe will catch what I just said. But I'm asking you the question,
Wow.
and you can answer it as well
Um.
as you see fit.
Yeah. Well, I think it's certainly much harder now because there's so much has been done, and there's also a certain amount of complacency by relying on old tropes and old ideas. And uh, I mean, everything you can think of that was super successful in movies, for example, has been made and remade continuously. And sometimes there are new ideas, but that's why when there is a new idea, it's so intriguing and captivating because most of the ideas are not new and are just rehashes and often poor rehashes of ideas that were better left in their original good form. So, of course, as you go on, it's going to get harder and harder. I don't know if it's a matter of just effort or as the statement goes, it's all been done. I don't know. I mean, I've heard that. I've heard that in music. I've heard that in movies. I've certainly seen it in wrestling, which has a tendency to copy things that were successful once. I don't think today in wrestling there's too much original stuff going on. There's bad, pale imitations of things that were done once or more than once in the past. But that's just my viewpoint. There might be some exceptions, but um, well, it's not impossible to have new ideas and new things, but it's going to take a heck of a lot more excavating to get it done, I think, and to find it after it's been done for the viewer.
Uh, so before uh, now I have a follow up question. Now that we've gotten knee deep in the weaves about this, so can you remember a movie that was in recent years that you saw? If you don't go to the movies so much, like I don't either,
Yeah.
I used to go more often than not pre-COVID. But can you think of a movie you saw recently or a movie that you can recall in recent times that was one of the more completely original ideas that you walked out of the theater saying, I've never seen that before?
No, I mean, I don't think I could. It was actually well before even COVID times that I kind of wound down my movie going activities. And one of the reasons for that was because I stopped feeling there was much originality. I didn't want to see poorly made reboots of things that I liked at one time, and something that was original. It was no, actually, I can't think of any right off the top of my head. As a matter, that's part of the reason I stopped going, is because I couldn't find much of that. And I guess if you're a fan of certain niches, maybe, but no, I think in mainstream movies, even more independent. I mean, sometimes in independent films, I guess you'd see some completely original stuff, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head. All the Hollywood blockbusters are either bad rehashes, or if they are original ideas, they weren't very good ideas to begin with. To me, anyway.
Well, I won't even go into the Hollywood realm because nowadays it's all about superhero movies, the DC universe, the Marvel universe, and blah, ga, 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 ga. But I'll tell you one movie, and some people are going to be like, what are you talking about? I'll tell you about one of the most original movies I ever saw, and I'm a huge fan of this guy's work, this man's work. I even seen, okay, I'll even go one step further. This guy's a musician. I even saw him play at the Montreal Jazz Festival years and years and years ago.
Wow.
So, little trivia. I'll give you the answer because I don't expect each and every one of you to know the answer, but it's one of those think outside the box kind of things. It was a movie that I saw back in almost 20 years ago. And I remember seeing the preview or the trailer when I used to go see multiple movies at well, now it's the Cineplex Forum, formerly known as the AMC, if you remember that. But the Cineplex Forum still honors the tradition of what the AMC theater was supposed to represent. So, back to my point. The movie, yeah, and I use the word point, Match Point, written and directed by Woody Allen.
Oh, controversial but brilliant figure.
Best part of the movie, not my opinion, but it was a review that I read and it resonated with me. He's not in it.
Is that what made it so good?
Well, it was
Oh,
it was one of those outside the box things that, because usually Woody Allen presents you with his own brand of comedy or humoristic drama, but this movie was nothing. Absolute, the Match Point had nothing to do with comedy, more so drama, and was more of a psychological thriller, if my memory serves me right. So that was a movie that really stood out to me, and it was like, oh, Woody Allen, as old as you are, thinking out of your comfort zone and doing something you don't normally do, because normally when you present a movie, it's supposed to be dramatically humoristic, but this movie was nothing of the sort. So that's a movie that stands out, in my own opinion. And yet, if you haven't seen it, I strongly urge you to see it. I really strongly urge you to see it because it's it's very different from, if ever you've watched any kind of Woody Allen movie, it's probably by far the most different, stand outside the box movie that he's ever done. Because for the most part, it's all been comedy or dramedy.
Yeah, yeah, that was a specialty for sure. But the Woody Allen has fallen out of favor with Hollywood, and he doesn't really make movies anymore, does he?
Last I heard, no. Last I heard, no. And he's one of, unfortunately, many legends that has been rightfully or wrongfully canceled due to past alleged inappropriate actions.
Well, that's it. I mean, his body of work stands the test of time, but you won't see any more work in the mainstream, I don't think.
No, but I'm sure he's made some good money, and I'm sure
Oh,
he's able to enjoy his unwilling retirement.
yeah, I mean, I don't know how willing he was to retire. He's certainly not young. I mean, he's definitely older by far, and you know, I guess it is what it is. But he must have made a pretty brilliant movie with the one you're talking about.
It was quite brilliant, and this is one of many movies where, well, okay, there's another movie that I loved, but it wasn't what I just spoke about. And now that we're on the topic of Woody Allen, well, I might as well discuss it. It was called Whatever Works, starring Larry David. You know, Larry David, the co creator of Seinfeld and the megastar of Curb Your Enthusiasm. And that was another movie of Woody Allen's body of work that stood out to me because it was one of those things where even Larry David went so far as to say, I'm playing a different kind of neurotic Jew.
Lovely.
Yes,
Oh,
but it's from the Woody Allen perspective as opposed to the Larry David perspective. Because Larry David has his own neuroses and his own worries and troubles, as does Woody Allen. So it was another one of those movies that really stood out to me because it's like watching Larry David, seeing his writing and his accomplishments on Curb Your Enthusiasm as well as Seinfeld, but listening to and seeing a completely different persona that he's never played before through the eyes of Woody Allen. And I was one of very few people to say I've seen that movie, and I gave it back in 2009 an extremely enthusiastic, when you get to the Siskel and Ebert stuff, an enthusiastic thumbs up as opposed to a thumbs down, which most critics gave it.
interesting. You know where my train of thought went during the your last talk, the last subject you were just talking about?
I think I know where it's going, and it's not good.
Actually, it's going to an unexpected place. It's actually going to Australia, of all
Oh, so we're
places.
going to pivot. So now we're going to pivot back to wrestling, which is where this whole conversation or this whole podcast is supposed to discuss. So let's go back to wrestling and let's go to Australia.
Well, it's because you were talking about the AMC forum, right? Is that what it was you were talking about?
Yes.
Um, well, I have a lot of, wrestling has a lot of great tradition in the Montreal Forum, what it used to be before it was a movie theater, going back, 50, 60 years, really, from the 1940s at least, all the way till its last show in January of '96, I believe. And I was just thinking about a movie inspired character, Outback Jack, that I saw in the first wrestling show I ever saw in the Forum, which was modeled after Crocodile Dundee, which people 40 years ago or 39 years ago were loading into theaters to see. So I traced back the Cineplex to the AMC to the Montreal Forum to the live wrestling show to Outback Jack to Crocodile Dundee. How do you like that?
I love it. I love it. And
Tie me kangaroo down, bro.
yeah, tie me kangaroo, Jack.
Speaking of
Um,
people that have been canceled, Rolf Harris.
Paul Hogan, Paul Hogan, no relation to the late Hulk Hogan, owes Outback Jack quite a royalty check.
Or does Outback Jack owe Paul? Well, yeah, maybe.
Well, they can work something out. They can work something out because at some point somebody copied the other.
I believe Outback Jack has no more eyesight, so somebody would have to write the check for him if he wrote.
No comment on that. Obviously, you know more than I do.
Well, Outback Jack is like a cult classic wrestling character. I think he, well, you know about wrestling collectibles way more than I do, and I believe there is an Outback Jack figure. Isn't there an action figure?
Well, there is only one. The one and only thing that exists is an Outback Jack LJN figure. There
Yeah.
has, unless guys, you prove me wrong, the only Outback Jack figure that was ever produced was the LJN figure that came out in the 80s. There hasn't been one since. Unless there's something else in the works, prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. I challenge you.
Excellent. Now can we go back to our original? I don't know how we got off on that. But Lord Humongous. That's what we're talking about.
Well, we were certainly talking about Lord Humongous, and this was a humongous sidebar.
It certainly was. But I mean, you have to realize, sitting in the crowd at the Continental Wrestling Federation, nobody knew who Sid Udy was. There was no Sid Vicious, no Sid Justice, no Psycho Sid yet. But you're watching a lot of the guys in Continental were pretty average sized wrestlers of the time, and here comes this guy who's like 6'9", and he has muscles growing on top of his muscles, and he's wearing a terrifying, maybe a science fiction mask, not a horror mask. That might have been a misnomer on my part. And he's turning babyface and teaming with Shane Douglas after being a terrifying heel for the longest time. And yes, that's the future ECW franchise, the future Dean Douglas, Shane Douglas that I'm talking about. And pretty wild because they were the tag team champions at this time. Wasn't that a crazy team? Lord Humongous, Sid Udy, and Shane Douglas. A year later, they'd be opposing each other when the Dynamic Dudes, brother, whatever you want to say, a dude. The Dynamic Dudes would be opposing the Skyscrapers in Jim Herd's NWA. But they were tag team champions a year before that when Sid was under the Lord Humongous mask. And what a crazy good baby face. Can you imagine the marketing with Lord Humongous if he's a baby face instead of a heel? Like, I mean, the marketing possibilities are, not in Continental, even if it fancied itself a third, big promotion or whatever. But, so anyway, my original point was that Eddie Gilbert lit this territory on fire, which is ironic because Eddie Gilbert was known to throw fireballs at people. So he also could light a territory on fire, and he certainly did that during this period. So I was talking, yeah, so the topic was basically what was going on in the summer of 1988 in August, this exciting wrestling promotion that would only last another year and a few months. Mick Foley would join this company in its latter days. Shane Douglas was there, of course, different ones. And so we had another year of the Continental Wrestling Federation, a little bit more than a year after the period I'm talking about. But boy, that summer of '88 and the magazines, like in Montreal, you couldn't really watch much Continental unless you were a tape trader. And boy, the magazines made it seem like they weren't that far behind Vince McMahon and Jim Crockett, I have to say.
It, it's an interesting subject that I never learned about, and I know we got quite off topic, but
No, but
it's
you know what?
entertaining.
Yeah, you know why you probably never heard of it? Because that's considered the lost territory. It's known in wrestling circles as the lost territory because a lot of the footage doesn't exist. I mean, the Continental footage exists, but a lot of its predecessors in that area, very hard to find good footage, except for fans who happen to maybe record it on their VCR. And it's been a frustration for WWE because that's one territory they can't really get their hands on. It's the territory that only a few people know the true, ins and outs of, except for, of course, the people who attended shows, many of whom may not even be alive anymore. But Continental is the great ghost territory, as it's called. So most people, even wrestling experts, don't know very much about Southeast Championship Wrestling, as it was called before. I think it was called Gulf Coast Wrestling for a while. And eventually in 1985, when the Fullers took it over, it was Continental Championship Wrestling, but that sounded too regional. And then, of course, the Continental Wrestling Federation in its last incarnation.
So I'm going back, looking at what we're talking about. We were talking about Continental, but another subject that you wanted to discuss. This would go down on the 6th of August in 1988, and this would be back when the WWF would do house shows. It's not like it is now, but house shows or live events at the Montreal Forum. And this is back in the day when house shows drew huge all across the United States, Canada, and all over the world. So, care to talk about that?
Yeah. Speak of the Montreal Forum, it's kind of ironic we're segueing into it. They had a big summer show, also in '88, same year we were just talking about. And this was during the period where the late Hulk Hogan was off filming No Holds Barred. And well, he'd actually just come back. He had just made his return a week earlier at the TV taping with his SummerSlam Mega Power partner Randy Savage, and they would of course go on to main event the first SummerSlam. But still, Randy Savage was the focus, and he was having a really hot series against Ted DiBiase, the Million Dollar Man. And these matches were actually drawing big numbers, and a lot of people were worried that fans wouldn't come out to see these shows where the world champion was not Hulk Hogan for the first time since 1983. And they actually did. And then you got to give credit to DiBiase, too. The DiBiase-Savage feud was pretty damn hot. And in May, they had battled at the Forum and were having a rematch here in August to main event this show. But because of what happened the previous time, they made it a no disqualification match to put a new twist on the Savage DiBiase feud. And yeah, and a lot of people came out to see it. You had 15,000 people. I mean, 2 years later, you had like barely 5,000. So you could see the 80s wrestling decline was not far away from beginning. I know that Jim Brunzell actually has said, of the Killer Bees, of course, that this period, 88 was when you first saw the house. You're talking about how people came out in droves for house shows. But 88 was the first year they really saw it dip a bit. Like, it still was very good, but it wasn't as absolutely great as the pinnacle year, like 87, WrestleMania 3, 86, 85. But it was still pretty darn good in a lot of spots. Here's a good example. I mean, in the night until the Attitude Era, you could never get 15,000. I don't even know if in the Attitude Era they got 15,000. I seem to think more like 12 or
Debatable.
I mean, by then, though, Monday Night Raw had taken over and there was weekly hot television, so it was a totally different landscape. House shows were not exactly the same, I guess, But in this era, if you wanted to see the big stars fight the big stars, you went to the house show. So in addition to Savage DiBiase, The show opened up with the aforementioned Sam Houston, Baby Doll's husband, half-brother of Jake the Snake Roberts, losing to Terry Taylor, who had not taken on the Red Rooster gimmick yet at this time. He was still wrestling under his own name. Of course, Bobby Heenan would take him under his wing and unfortunately call him the Red Rooster, which has stuck to him like white on rice for way too many years as the most embarrassing gimmick perhaps ever. But he was Terry Taylor here. Do you want to say anything about Terry Taylor? No?
Well, this would be the point in time where I give the Red Rooster, but
Not yet. That's why they're coughing, because he wasn't
too old.
Too old. Okay, cool. The returning Iron Sheik was also on the card here. Vince had given him another shot after the infamous New Jersey Turnpike arrest of the year before and brought him back for the summer of '88, in which he was back on television and back doing house shows. Didn't last that long, but here he wrestled a guy who I believe is going to be making an appearance next month, the magnificent Richard Charlon.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So Richard Charlon was doing a lot of Montreal, Toronto, Ottawa, Hull house shows at this time for WWF. And, well, he wasn't going to beat the Iron Sheik on this night, I'll say that. So the Iron Sheik humbled him, you might say.
He put him in the camel clutch. He humbled the man.
That's right. He did exactly that. And one of the hottest feuds of '88, perhaps even almost hotter than Savage DiBiase, saw Sam Houston's more famous half-brother, Jake the Snake Roberts, and ravishing Rick Rude, which, bar none for me, was my favorite feud of '88, because the feud was over Jake's wife, Cheryl, who he recently remarried in the real world now. Cheryl was on the road with him, and ravishing Rick Rude mysteriously managed to pick her out of the audience and try to lay the Rude Awakening kiss on her, and she slapped his face. You remember that whole angle, I'm sure.
Oh, that I remember. And I know Jake has gone on record and said, well, the whole program was have my wife on the road with me. Make sure I don't have to deal with my drugs and my bullshit.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, I exaggerated a little bit, but
no, I mean,
no. Cheryl was on the road with him because he was dealing with his personal demons, like most of us, let alone myself, have and continue to deal with. But it was just figured into the storyline. But kudos and much love to Cheryl for remarrying Jake, taking him back. And it seems like nowadays they are happier than they ever were. But then again, we don't exactly know what their situation was, because back in the day when Cheryl and Jake were a thing for the first time, we don't have social media like we do today. But now you can profess and publicize your love and admiration for somebody thanks to social media, or for the worst. Because maybe there's some people that are like, don't put that shit out there. It's private. Mind your own. People need to mind your own business.
Yeah, but Jake said that things were not good at this time in their marriage, and going on the road was not a good thing for her, because A, she didn't want to go, and the second reason why it wasn't so good?
You answer the question. I don't want to assume, because then I make an ass of me, myself, and I, not you and me.
Fair enough. Well, the second reason it wasn't so good is because she saw things on the road that she shouldn't have seen, that Jake, and not to mention his colleagues, did not want her seeing either. So she got an even worse impression of the wrestling business and the inside of it than she would have. The reality was even worse than she'd imagined, basically. So really sowed the seed of destruction, besides Jake's personal demons in their marriage. So it was not a joyful time in the life of Jake and Cheryl, but it was a big joy for all of us to see the Jake-Rick Rude feud, and the fact that it was based on Cheryl. I mean, they didn't have a very good match at WrestleMania 4 in the World Title Tournament, but their angle hadn't even aired yet, even though it was filmed a few weeks before that on the regular syndicated television shows. But yes, at the Forum, the Grudge feud was on. This was a great match around the horn. Anywhere you saw it, it was, even if the wrestling part wasn't great, just the intensity, the heat, and the believability of it. What a great basis for a feud, you know? Like the worst Casanova hits on your wife, doesn't even know it's your wife, and then can't imagine why she's with you when she could be with him, like the hot Tom Selleck hunk of the of the wrestling world, the late great ravishing Rick Rude. So just a brilliant, brilliant feud, which unfolded here too. You also got to see the newly crowned King Haku go against the Junkyard Dog, which was as predictably bad as you would expect. Junkyard Dog was really on the downslide, unfortunately, at this time, and just used to job out to various people. They were trying to build up King Haku. A match that was fascinating to me for all the sad reasons is that I was excited first because it was announced originally as Dino Bravo, Montreal's own, against Bam Bam Bigelow, which I thought was a hell of a match, like on paper, to see these two strong, big, brutish guys go at it. But unfortunately, Bam Bam left the WWF by the time this match had happened, and Hillbilly Jim needed to take his place against Dino, which is not nearly as intriguing a matchup as you might imagine. And we were unfortunately robbed of Bigelow versus Bravo, and Bigelow, of course, went to the NWA soon after and would go after the Four Horsemen, with Sir Oliver Humperdinck, still a babyface at his side. And then, of course, he was a heel until his babyface turn in the WWF when Ted DiBiase's corporation ejected him after losing to Lawrence Taylor at WrestleMania 11. But at this time, this was Bam Bam's babyface year, and I really would have liked the Bigelow Bravo match to happen, but we instead got Hillbilly losing, of course, losing to Dino Bravo. But a very exciting debut in Montreal of the Powers of Pain, the Warlord and the Barbarian, fresh from the NWA, and of course they made mincemeat out of the Bolsheviks, as they would do at SummerSlam in Madison Square Garden later that month as well. The Powers of Pain, the Bolsheviks were the Powers of Pain first regular opponents when Warlord and Barbarian came in, and their very brief babyface run until the double turn with Demolition at the Survivor Series. So all in all, pretty above average house show. I mean, DiBiase and Savage kind of tore the house down too. So very good in August of '88, what they brought. And the summer is not usually the biggest drawing period for wrestling because there's so many other things to do. A city like Montreal, I mean, has many, many things obviously to do in the summer, but they still drew 15,000 people to see this in August of '88.
Well, this is one of, I wouldn't say it boggles my mind, but I've seen my fair share of wrestler shoot interviews. And more often than not, I'm not saying 9 times out of 10, but several shoot interviews that I've seen, every city that gets name dropped amongst bigger cities than the city we live in, Montreal has been name dropped on multiple occasions, if not multiple quintessential umpteenth occasions in which the city, our city, has been dropped as per crowd response, crowd reaction, crowd participation, and attendance.
Well, yeah. I mean, for sure. I mean, especially in the '90s when wrestling was down in the first half of the '90s. I mean, Montreal still kept up great attendance from, I'd say, about '94, '95. You know, no, it's true. Montreal is pretty special in a lot of regards, and Montreal has a very rich wrestling history, and yeah, absolutely. And still, I mean, even now, I mean, people know it as a city where they might react differently to certain baby faces and tweeners and heels than they normally would in some other cities. Didn't somebody say, I don't know if it was John Cena or who it was, who said that this is Bizarro Land? They called Montreal Bizarro.
That was Jerry Lawler.
It was Jerry Lawler?
Jerry Lawler. My whole thing was Jerry. I remember Jerry Lawler starting the whole Bizarro Land thing, and this is going back to 2004. Um, this was when Monday Night Raw was emulating from uh, the Bell Center. I believe, if my memory serves me right, the day was May 31st or the 31st of May 2004. And this is the thing, I was there live in the audience, but you don't hear the commentary. You watch it back later and then you hear it.
Yeah.
And if that is the episode, guys, if you watch it back later, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Correct me and drop us a comment. But I do remember one thing that stood out. I don't know who was feeding Jerry Lawler said lines, but what I remember most of it was um, Jerry Lawler. It was back when Jerry Lawler and JR were on commentary, so to speak. So Jerry is positioned as the smartass, which he kind of is in real life. So he says to JR, he's like, "Oh, hey JR, do you know the Prime Minister of Quebec?" He's like, "Well, I think the Prime Minister is Jean Chrétien." And this is before Paul Martin. And he's like, "No, they have a premier. Do you know his name?" "Well, King, I don't know. Jean Charest or Jean Charest."
Shrek.
Better times, better times.
Yeah.
And that was one of many instances. But almost just about every single time, Jerry Lawler will call Quebec or maybe even Canada Bizarro Land. But
Because of Brent.
we are as a city, let alone the province, Bizarro Land. And don't you show up at my doorstep and put a gun to my head and shoot me because I said that. You are who you are. You think the way you think, and you are bizarre, and the rest of the country, let alone the United States, thinks the same thing. Est-ce que j'ai besoin de traduire ça en français? Peut-être pas.
Well, at least Jerry Lawler knew who the premier of Quebec was at that time.
I don't even know who was even feeding Lawler these lines, unless Jerry Lawler really is really one of those people that does his research.
Never, yeah.
And it wouldn't surprise me if he did, because I remember the very first live event or house show that I went to for the WWF was in May of 1995.
Yeah.
And Jerry Lawler was a heel, of course, and he was wrestling PCO, Pierre Carl Ouellet, and at the time he was Jean Pierre Lafitte. I don't believe it might have been May, it might have been.
It was May 19th. I was there. I remember.
And I remember Jerry Lawler made a comment, and this is, again, it's so easy to take jabs or slag a poor performing sports team, which he's done more often than other, and it doesn't have anything to do with the Montreal Canadiens, the Alouettes, the Impact, or what have you. But hockey, this was when we were at the Forum, and of course he made a jab to get himself some heat that the Canadiens didn't make the playoffs. But It was again. It's a great way to get heat, especially with the Montreal crowd.
Sure, sure.
So I suppose he does his research. Now, having said that, I remember looking back in the day when the Fight Network used to have this thing called Ultimate Classic Wrestling, in which they would play. And this is going to be a segue into our next topic because we're talking about USWA World Class. Moving on, so there's I remember watching a mat I remember watching a whole thing on Jerry Lawler. So he was supposed to take on Terry Gordy. So one of the things he said, hey, somebody call the narcotics squad because 350 pounds of dope just walked in. Oh, and hey, by the way, will the lady with their 7 kids please pick them up? They're beating the Dallas Cowboys by so much.
Great.
I don't remember the stats or the score. I don't remember exactly what he said or the stats or the score, but the whole point was to get heat to knock Dallas.
Why? Okay, because what did it have to do with Dallas? He was wrestling in Memphis, or they were in the.
No, this was during the
Oh,
time where it was the USWA. So this was
oh,
during the partnership in
uh,
which World Class Championship Wrestling and the CWA became the United States Wrestling Association, or the USWA.
right.
So this was footage that the Fight Network obtained for a moment's time or a specific time.
Gotcha.
And I remember watching it, and I remember watching it with my dad, and my dad was like laughing his ass off. He always loved Jerry Lawler. And even as a little kid, you know, being indoctrinated or introduced into the world of wrestling, I always thought he was funny. Even though he was knocking Bret Hart, who was from Canada, I always thought he was funny.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He definitely was, and probably unlike Jesse Ventura, he did do his homework. But remember when he told Bret Hart's father to to put his false teeth in backwards, and he hopes he eats himself to death? Or something?
Um, I don't remember that, but it wouldn't surprise me if the wittiness of Jerry the King Lawler would have said that to Stu Hart.
Yeah,
Hey, I gotta put my teeth in the opposite way, so hey, I hate myself.
apparently Brett and Owen were really, really angry at Lawler because he went too far. They felt, and there was actually legitimate heat between them for Lawler really, really ragging on his parents. Even though Stu and Helen found it kind of amusing, they weren't. I don't think Brett and Owen were very much amused. Isn't one of the
Well,
Hart kids?
it goes to show you have to have thick skin and you got to be able to take some stuff. I'm not saying Brett and Owen aren't thick or thin skinned, but
Well,
there
Brett's pretty
comes a
thin.
point.
Well, Brett is pretty thin-skinned. I don't know how Owen was, but I mean, Owen liked to rib people, of course. But no, Bret Hart is obviously pretty. Doesn't take much to get under his skin, as he's proven many, many times. At least in the last 25 years, anyway. So,
All right, on that note, we're going to pivot to the second to last topic of this evening. So, we're going to be talking about the 36th year anniversary, which went down on the 4th of August of the Von Erich family owned World Class Championship Wrestling Association, merging with Continental Association, run by, well, Jerry Jarrett and Jerry Lawler out of Memphis to create the USWA. But we touched on it. We touched on it, but I know there's so much more that could be said, and I leave the floor to you. And I'll be back in a moment. I just got to get another thermos of water. So, Alan, take it away.
all right, thanks, David. Yeah, I mean, and again, the Continental Wrestling Association should not be confused with Continental Championship Wrestling, later the Continental Wrestling Federation. Um, well, I wouldn't even call. Well, yeah, I mean, sometimes it was called Continental Wrestling Association, or yeah, but I mean, it was more like Championship Wrestling Association. That was the Memphis promotion that Jerry Lawler made his name in. But here we're going to the the early 1989, we'll say late 1988, World Class Championship Wrestling is falling apart financially. The Von Erich family owe the Dallas Sportatorium tons of money. They owe a bunch of people money. They owe people who work, the owners of the arena. They were behind on so many bills and all kinds of things. And the Von Erich dynasty had taken a major hit after David's death and Mike's death, and the whole Lance Von Erich fiasco where they used a fake Von Erich as a Von Erich, and the luster was over, the bloom was off the rose, and so Fritz Von Erich, getting older and getting tired, was just not wanting to really keep it up anymore. So it was recommended they maybe look for a buyer, and his two remaining sons, Kevin and Kerry, couldn't be trusted to really run the group because if you think Jake had personal demons, the Von Erichs had personal demons coming out the wazoo, and they couldn't run a promotion properly. They couldn't even appear as talent in a responsible way. So running the promotion was, they had some
Sorry,
ownership
for,
in
I
it.
apologize for the background noise because I was just about to. Okay, come on. Sorry, Alan. I'm just going to. I wanted to stupidly send a link. I wanted to send a link because I wanted to send a Jerry Jarrett. Of course, this is one of the very last Jerry Jarrett shoot interviews that he did, where he talks about the Von Erich family. So I'm going to put it in the chat, and let's hope it all works out. Sorry for the interruption. That was ridiculously stupid on my part. Please continue. I'll try my best to continue behind the scenes.
Oh, that's no problem. I'll try to make chicken salad out of this. All right. So basically, yeah. So the Jerry Jarrett, as a very wealthy, successful promoter, was considered, and they had been, starting to work with the AWA, and the Super Clash 3 thing was going to happen and all this. So Jerry Jarrett wasn't totally interested at first, especially when he saw how much money he'd have to pay off the old bills. And but what was going to happen to World Class? And anyway, eventually they came to a deal where Jerry Jarrett got another investor, one of his people, to basically take on about half the financial burden. But the Von Erichs didn't want to totally relinquish their stranglehold on it because, as probably in the link David is putting up, Fritz Von Erich told Jerry that he didn't even trust his own kids. So these people, like the Von Erich boys wanted like half ownership still, and Jerry Jarrett was not going to go for it. So Jerry Jarrett was ready to walk away and say, well, fine, enjoy your bankruptcy, and then they relented. So Jerry Jarrett took over about, I think, 70% ownership, and the Von Erich boys split, I think, 30%. And this is what was going to happen to Texas wrestling. They were going to start over. Now, Jerry Jarrett, they had to get rid of the World Class name because so much of that, I think, was tied up with the tragic legacy of the Von Erichs. They really wanted to start new. And Jarrett, as per Fritz's suggestion, didn't want to put Fritz's sons in charge of the office because Jerry Jarrett wanted to go back to Memphis to do his stuff and wrestling and his other business interests. So he put the flamboyant Eric Embry, who became the babyface flagship carrier, the carrier of the flag, if you will, for the fledgling United States Wrestling Association, as well as wrestling manager, super talented General Skandor Akbar, in charge of the office with Embry in Texas. and they started anew. And on this date, we're talking about August the 4th of 1989, they did that famous ritual, if you will, of ripping down the world class banner and putting up the United States Wrestling Association banner. Mick Foley was in attendance for that. He was a world class wrestler at the time. And they had Gary Young, and they had, of course, Tojo Yamamoto and Phil Hickerson and from Tennessee, who became the evil P.Y. Chuhi, the Asian. Hilarious, because he was the most out of shape southern redneck guy you could ever see doing a faux Asian gimmick, but he could really work. He was a great worker. You had a lot of interesting talent. Eric Embry became the chief babyface, going against Skandor Akbar's group of evil men. So this date was the transition when USWA took over. Eventually, the Von Erichs, after a few months, didn't like this, and they decided to leave and continue world class on their own, which was a complete disaster. And they eventually merged, of all people, with the Savoldi's ICW in Maine to form the IWCCW, International World Class Championship Wrestling. But the USWA continued as its own entity, but they eventually got out of Texas and were exclusively based in Memphis. And then the Global Wrestling Federation would come in 91. But at this time, there were high hopes. And Jerry Jarrett did say, rest in peace, when he was alive, that they did manage to turn the fortunes around financially. They right away paid off the old bills and got business up. And yeah, I mean, this was a new era, I mean, where the Von Erichs did not rule Texas for this period. And Eric Embry, the most unlikely chief babyface, Eric Embry was good at what he did. I mean, WWF would never hire Eric Embry. He didn't have a look that they would like. He had a big southern drawl, so he wasn't ideal for WWF. Even the NWA may not have touched him, but he was the perfect man at this time to do this. Eric Embry had been on the USA Network years before, but not for the WWF. Before WWF got USA Network and before Raw, there was, of course, the predecessor, Prime Time Wrestling on Monday night. Joe Blanchard, Southwest Championship Wrestling, not to be confused with the Continental Territory Southeast Championship Wrestling, used to air nationally on the USA Network. And around 1983, 84, Embry was a really talented, gutsy babyface guy. And he went against Tully Blanchard, Joe's son, at the time. So Eric Embry, of all people, who would never make it to the WWF, was on USA Network regularly before Vince McMahon bought the time slot. That's just a side note. Anyway, Eric Embry, chief babyface, he ran the office with Akbar. The Von Erichs couldn't be trusted, despite their legacy, to do so. This was the birth of the USWA, and pretty well the end of any glory period that world-class championship wrestling had, although it wasn't really glorious at this time. The crowds were getting anemic, and that's how they got behind on the bills and such. So that's this topic, the emergence of the USWA.
All right. And folks, the very last comment that I just placed that you see at the very bottom of the screen. So I've done two things. So the comment you see that I posted at 8:02 p.m. Eastern Time is the full 4.5, near 5-hour interview with Jerry Jarrett. If you got the stomach for it, and if you want to watch it in digestible chunks or in its entirety. However, chicken salad, And then at 8:03, so I have another link. So if you're really looking to get to the point of what Allen just discussed and what just told us about, and you want to get the respective perspective from the late, great Jerry Jarrett, the link that I posted in our chat, if you're able to see it on Facebook and YouTube, if you're not, please let me know. And if you're interested in listening to it or watching it, I can send it to you. This is a edited, condensed segment in which Jerry discusses his dealings with the Von Erich family. And Jerry Jarrett's comments expand on what you were speaking about, Alan.
Thank you. Great. Well, from straight from the horse's mouth. I mean, the late Jerry Jarrett, he lived it, so worth checking out.
And lastly, in order to wrap things up, so we are going to talk about, and as you said, it's difficult not to commemorate during the August 4th, 1997 100th episode of WCW Monday Nitro, in which Lex Luger, WWE Hall of Famer,
Hall of Flamer.
Famer, Freudian slip on my part, class of 2025, defeated Hulk Hogan to win the WCW World Heavyweight title and end the NWO leader's near year-long reign. And I remember watching this as I was vacationing with my parents in Chicago during that specific episode. What would you like to talk about in regards to said moment?
Well, I mean, basically that this was very last minute on the part of WCW because Luger and Hogan had a match coming up at Road Wild. I don't think it was Hog Wild yet. It was Road Wild. It was Hog Wild. I don't know.
Hog Wild, Road Wild. Everybody's going some kind of wild, no matter how you manufacture or how you promote it, but everybody's going some kind of wild.
Yeah. Very well said. Thank you. So basically, at this point, the NWO was at its peak, and they just ran so roughshod over who was left on the WCW kayfabe side of things that there was a thought that because Nitro was coming to its 100th episode, maybe they should give the fans a bone they weren't really expecting and give WCW a win, because for an entire year and 2 months, or a year and a month or whatever, the NWO were just massacring everybody. So they said, let's make a new hero here. And Lex Luger has been getting the loudest pops on the babyface side, even though the NWO obviously were getting strangely tweener pops from because everybody loved the faction and the gimmick. So it was decided that Luger and Hogan are going to face each other on pay-per-view in 6 days or whatever from here, or 5 days, whatever, 6 days, I think.
I do believe it was, because I do recall watching the said Nitro episode, and this is where they were also building up the whole thing with Sting versus Hogan, which would eventually become Starrcade 97, which we've already talked about before, but that was the whole main arc of the episode, and in weeks and months to come. But I do recall Luger winning the WCW World Heavyweight title only to drop it back to Hogan days later at Hog Wild, Road Wild. I just say WCW was wild, so any kind of wild.
Yeah, exactly. So Hogan, creative control aside, Hogan had to have the belt to go into the feud with Sting, which they were building toward at Starrcade. But in the meantime, that was a few months away, and why not give Luger the belt for a few days and really pop the crowd and made the 100th episode of Nitro in Detroit, super over and popular. It was just a big moment. I mean, this was Luger's second WCW World title win, of course. The first one he won under dubious circumstances, as he was supposed to face Ric Flair at the 1991 Great American Bash, which, of course, did not happen because Flair took the belt and told Jim Herd, he took the belt home and told Jim Herd where he could stick it. And Luger and Barry Windham fought in the worst pay-per-view of all time, it was felt. at that time for sure. Anyway, and but Luger did have an interesting reign then. But Luger, who of course Eric Bischoff has said many times, he initially had no interest in bringing to WCW, but was talked into it by Sting. At this point, had proven himself enough that there it was. Lex Luger. It's very, very weird to watch now because Luger comes down to the ring with Elizabeth. I mean, how unsettling is that? All things considered. And of course,
No
now
comment. No comment.
no comment. And of course, now with Hogan, so two of the three chief participants are no longer with us. Luger, of course, an inspirational Hall of Famer now. But yeah, it was just to see him. Like you see Kevin Nash and Scott Hall getting into the ring and are promptly destroyed by Luger, and Luger actually gets Hogan up in the torture rack, and Hogan submits. I mean, it was very, very unusual at this time, and it was quite a moment. And it's I guess looking back, it's not the biggest moment, but it was a big moment for the time, and at this time of year, it's worth remembering, I guess, because at that time it seemed like the NWO. This was the problem too. Is even Dave Meltzer said it. Our good buddy said the NWO was kind of done wrong after the initial brilliance of it, because one day there is going to be no NWO, and if WCW looks like a big bunch of chumps compared to the NWO, then what's going to be left when the NWO gimmick is done? WCW are going to look like a bunch of jabronis, quote unquote, in the fans' eyes. So it was important to give WCW some traction here, and that's what they did when Luger, surprise, surprise, emerged the winner. And the ring was flooded with baby faces like the Big Show and whoever else, jumping in there and celebrating. And for 6 days, you had a babyface WCW non-NWO world champion. So it was not my favorite period, of course, in WCW history by any means, but it is worth noting with the benefit of hindsight and the passage of time. Luger got his glory back and became the hot babyface of the company at that time, other than Sting, who was in the rafters, being quiet for a whole year, building up the Starcades.
Yes. So this is going to put a bow on this week's episode of, I don't know what to call it. It's a free-form Sunday night special. This sure ain't free-form Friday, but we went live. The original discussion, the original plan was to go live last night, but we didn't. I was out on the town. Well, I wouldn't say out on the town, but I was spending time with family and spending all the time required with family, and circumstances as such prohibited myself not to place blame or throw anyone under the bus. It's just, it was not at all possible for us to record last night, and Friday also was not a possibility. However, we do hope to continue to bring you more content, and I cannot stress this enough. If you like what you see, if you have suggestions, criticisms, improvements, be constructive, don't be negative. Let us know in the comments. And also, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is Freeform Friday, Triple F. And also, let's not forget, September the 20th at Ruby Foods, 7655 DeCary, will be Montreal's first ever wrestling convention, Slamfest, brought to you by our partners at LWA Live Wrestling Auctions, JF Jean-Francois Firestorm Leduc, and Joe McCausey, as well as the Captain's Corner. So you are going to have guests such as the following: You will have Charles Wright. You will have the Godwins. You will have Barry Windham, Mario Mancini, Paul Roma, Ray Apollo, aka Doink the Clown. And you will also have various people who are of utter importance to la communauté de la lutte en français, comme Richard Charlin, Marc Blondin, Pat Laprade et plusieurs autres. Soyez-y, mesdames et messieurs. Si vous voudrez acheter vos billets, if you want to purchase your tickets, slamfest.ca, slamfest.ca. You also have the option of participating in a special evening the night before Slamfest. It's a bit expensive, but if you're up to this, I'm not going to say don't do it. I'll tell you. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but it's up to you. So, for $100, you will have the opportunity to meet Mark Canterbury, Dennis Knight, and Charles Wright, who are part of the BSK crew, alongside The Undertaker, as well as Yokozuna, Paul Bearer. But we got some BSK, and as well as the Samoans, we got some BSK members in the house. However, it's $100 for admission. If you wish to provide food and adult or non-adult beverages, that is at your own expense. And let's not forget, September the 20th will be Slamfest at Ruby Foods. Purchase your tickets at www.slamfest.ca. Be there or be square. Do not miss out on this ultimate opportunity. Should you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please reach out to me. Or it would be best to reach out to the two folks that are highly responsible for promoting this show. Reach out to JF and Joe at the LWA Live Wrestling Auctions Facebook page. Send them a message, send them a DM. They're quite quick and quite responsive. Any questions or concerns you may have, they are ready and willing to answer them. On that note, I thank you all so much for tuning in to our broadcast. Thank you for those that tuned in live, and thank you to those that will intend on planning on joining us later. Please do so. And like I said, if you like the content, don't be shy. Like, subscribe, and tell your friends, because there's nothing better than building our brand one day and one step at a time. Thank you all so much for joining us. Take care of yourselves and each other, and love one another. And we will see each and every one of you next time. He's Allen Greenberg, and I am David Buchanan, and we are out of here. Take care, everyone. I know this is a Sunday night, so I wish you all a good week. I wish you all a great week, and don't sweat the small stuff. We're always here for one another. Good night, and take care.